This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Rozzik. He is a theatrical hard rock act from New York City. The band is comprised of many players, as well as the lead singer, who is Core himself. The sound can be compared to Alice Cooper, Disturbed, Avenged Sevenfold, and Rob Zombie. They've been touring nationally since 2016, appearing on multiple headlining runs, festival appearances, and direct tour support for Otep, Nita Strauss, and others. For the last 2 years, the band has been touring openly support for KISS Legend and Ace Frehley. They're currently recording new music with Grammy-nominated producer Dan Malsch from Ghost and Avenged Sevenfold, and are on the hunt for new booking agent and touring opportunities. It's a pleasure to have you on, Core.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Good to be here.
It's very exciting, actually. I was introduced to you by common friends, and it's interesting because I love new music, and I automatically went to your website, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then I joined your fan page, and I'm getting text messages, and I'm part of your email system. And I thought, wow, this is great because you don't always see that kind of push for new fans or keeping interactive with fans. So I think that's going to be really helpful as you start getting more events and things getting posted so your fans can run out to your events and stuff.
That's the whole idea. Nowadays you got to be very creative because even to this day, I have industry people tell me you got to do more social media content, you got to do more stuff, and it's like we're gearing up to doing that. But having said that, you got to find a way to get through the saturation because there's just so much out there on the internet. I mean, we all have ADD now, just like scrolling. So you got to find ways to be personable and get people's attention. And we're still kind of building our whole community, which is kind of part of the whole new Dead Society era that I'm creating, which is not just my alternate characters, Core Rozzik, but also our alternate universe, which we can dive into kind of where the new music is going. But yeah, it's all about creating a sense of community, and which doesn't happen overnight, but hopefully all that text message stuff I'm doing will help with that.
Yes, I know. When I saw your website and then I enlisted to this, and then it said I was part of the Dead Society, I was like, wow, what is this all about? I can't wait to ask him about this. So how did that come about?
Well, it's a concept I started a couple of years ago, and it's taken a little bit of time to come to fruition, but we're getting there. But basically, the Dead Society storyline is my next chapter. My first record, Vengeance Overdrive, was also a concept record, and that record was more based around Core, who at the time was the bastard child of New York City. He was a misunderstood rock star. He became blacklisted from the local scene, and he started doing all this crazy stuff to try to become famous and powerful. So that's like what the first story was about. But the new Dead Society story, Core is basically the anti-hero savior of the group, the Dead Society. And they're basically all the outcast kids that just want to play rock and roll and be expressive and feel free. Because in that universe, the government is very oppressive. So the kids basically run away from home and they gather in this small town, which they've nicknamed Rock Hell, and Core is their leader. So it's a kind of a interesting, escape from New York dystopian kind of storyline. So all my music, I take things that happened in my life for real, but I then put them into stories. So that's kind of what the new thing is. So the Dead Society is basically, anybody that still believes in the power of rock and roll, as cheesy as that might sound.
I love that. So between the two stories, they go in line with two different albums.
Yeah. So the Avenged Sevenfold was the first record we made pre-COVID, and now Dead Society is a whole new thing. I kind of see the Core Rozzik character as almost like a Indiana Jones or something. You can kind of put him in any like timeline, and he does what he does type of a thing. So yeah.
That's really neat. Well, I've listened to some of your new music, your most current work, and it's very impressive. I mean, I just love it. So I played it a few times already. So I want to go into a little bit more of like how you're thinking, because you're the lead singer. You must be part of the collaboration of creating all of these songs. Do you also see yourself as a songwriter?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've been playing guitar since I was 12. but I'm very different. I mean, I don't totally consider myself a guitar player. I don't do solos and crazy stuff, just basic bar chords. But from the moment I started playing guitar when I was young, I wasn't too big on learning other people's songs. Most great accomplished guitar players, that's how they start. They really work on mimicking and learning all their favorite bands. I didn't do that much of that. I instantly just started writing songs for whatever reason in my brain of just listening to music consistently at a young age. I guess I perceived music in my own way. So I guess I thought I knew what it was, and you get better every day as you work more and more, with songs and have different experiences. But most kids have different types of hobbies. A lot of kids get into sports or, little league teams or something to that effect, and that wasn't really me. My passion was music and WWF wrestling, So between those two things, that's kind of what helped me create, I guess, my vision that happened over time.
So, growing up for you, was that in the New York City area?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Queens, New York, Kew Garden Hills to be exact. I found out later after reading his book, apparently Paul Stanley grew up in the same neighborhood like 5 blocks away. So that was pretty interesting to discover that. And I was only down the hill from the Ramones where they grew up in Forest Hills. So, Queens was pretty cool. There was definitely a couple of hometown heroes from back in the day, and obviously I was a Ramones fan and I became a Kiss fan as well. So it was kind of cool growing up where I was, even though I think in my early years I was kind of sheltered. I've always been kind of a loner. I don't know if that's like a Virgo only child thing, but I was always very much to my own devices. But I was a good kid. I didn't really get in trouble. I was just really big about collecting my cassettes and like listening to music and playing with my wrestling action figures and just kind of creating my own little world in my room, and that's something that I still value to this day, especially when I meet like younger bands that are coming up in the scene that I get to befriend and stuff. It kind of reminds me of that because some of the younger bands that I'm getting to know now, their music is so raw and genuine, and I love that because they're not jaded yet, because when you're younger, it's so innocent. You're just wearing your influences on your sleeve, and for better or for worse, you're just putting it out there. And for me, as I've gotten older, and I'm kind of a procrastinator and what I call a lazy perfectionist, you want to please the masses, and I think that's why Korosik sounds the way it does. I think it's my attempt at making heavy music that's still palatable, and hopefully I've been successful at that. But I would say in the last couple of years, it's compromised my output because I'm always thinking like, oh, is this, commercial enough, or is this catchy enough, or will the real metalheads think it's metal enough? It's like I always because I think my roots are very metal, but I think there's a lot of cliche new metal fans that would say, no, that's not metal. But then again, I have hope when I listen to bands like Ghost that are just doing so well now, because I mean really when you look at Ghost, it has metal roots but it's not super heavy and it's very melodic and catchy, so that really makes me feel a little bit better. But yeah, it's just interesting when you look at how you progress as a writer and what you're influenced by and what you take notes on. I think when you become like a mainstream artist, it does become challenging because you want to stay true to yourself, but in the back of your mind, you're like, well, I want to write stuff that people will like. So I think there's a big difference between being a rock star in your bedroom and then being a rock star, actually on stage. So
That's a good reference. Yeah. It's interesting because I don't really know your timeline, but when you were growing up and getting really involved in music, what were your early influences?
yeah, I went through a lot of different phases. I mean, through high school, I listened to like a variety of different types of hard rock and metal. I felt like once I got out of high school and I started playing out locally, I went through like more of like a thrash phase where I was really obsessed with like Overkill and Megadeth, and I really wanted to be Bobby Blitz of Overkill. And that was just a lot of like ripped jeans and leather vests and stuff. And we were kind of like thrashy, like street punk kids. And then a little later on, I went more Alice Cooper like. To me, Alice Cooper is probably my first idol because from a psychological standpoint with performance, I base a lot of what I do on Alice. And I never intentionally mean to rip him off, but every time I have a good idea, he's probably already done it. That's just the truth. And then when I really got into the New York City scene in the early 2010s, ironically, surprisingly, even to me, there was a really big glam scene. Glam had come back, and there was other bands like myself, Wild Street, Party Death. There was Pansy. There was a lot of these other bands that were teasing their hair to the sky and wearing, spandex. And I always loved 80s hair metal. So I kind of went that route for a little bit, and all my music was very upbeat and cheesy and, live like there's no tomorrow and I'm a rock star. And it was very like party stuff. And my guitar player's definitely swept a lot of that stuff under the rug because he doesn't like that stuff too much. But I was all glam metal for a while. And then once we got to the Vengeance Overdrive era, I would say we went much more darker and heavier, and it was definitely more thrash and new metal and different types of things. That first record is very at times doomy, and then other times kind of riffy and thrashy, but it's definitely more aggressive. The character's very angry in that record because he's just desperately trying to get revenge on everybody that doubted him and tried to mess with him, and he just wants that fame and fortune so bad by any means necessary. So that's like the vibe of that record. But the new stuff we're doing now, I think, is a perfect mixed bag of all my influences from past and present. And I think the new stuff has a unique, it's got like a futuristic vibe to it, but it's almost like a retro futuristic vibe, if that makes sense. And I think I have the pulse on social commentary now. I don't want to necessarily say that I've become a political artist because I would never ask people to choose a side on things. But I think the new music is a little bit more mature, even though it's still in a Korozik storyline universe. It's more socially aware. We're talking about money and greed and division, and censorship and the loss of our dreams as we get older, from childhood to adulthood. So even though it's in a crazy storyline, there's some very relatable themes in there. And I don't think my first record was that relatable. It was very egocentric in that sense. So, we're progressing.
Well, I picked that up because when I listened to your song Dollar, it goes hand in hand with a video. And
Yes.
the video actually is, you could have the volume off and you could literally kind of get the vibe for what the song is about, which I think
Hmm.
is great. But sometimes songs don't send a message. And I think in your own way, you've crafted the song to send a message, but the message is not like screaming in your ear. It's more of a subliminal message in some sort of a way, which kind of, meets all sides of the listener. So you're not going to put anyone off.
Right.
At the same
Yeah.
time, it's just very well depicted. And it can also touch different areas of people's life. Not everybody could see it in one way. So I think it's very creative. I was really kind of drawn to that. But I want to go back to something you had said earlier about having Alice Cooper being like your first idol. And I really can resonate with that. I've seen him live, which is always like very theatrical and very
Yep.
dramatic and very over the top, but just very Alice, which is quite beautiful in its own way. But when I was very little, I mean, I was probably in my early teens, I remember listening very carefully to his lyrics, and it felt very introspective. All of his songs were looking inside of how the person felt, what was going on to that person in that song. It felt very directed inwardly, not so much outwardly. It was also kind of going through a lot of emotions. All of his songs were very emotional in some way. So that's why I think it's interesting that you identified him as one of your early idols. And he's also an incredible songwriter. But how you talked about your early life being very alone, in your room, doing solo play, with your action figures and stuff. So I think there's a lot of parallels in finding, your own idol, but also in some way not really realizing it, creating a songwriter in yourself from a songwriter. Like you said, you don't want to rip him off, but there's a lot of similarities. It could be very much identifying feelings that are expressed in his songs.
Yeah, 100%. I think all famous musicians, aka rock stars, you could envision them as someone to look up to or envision somebody that might be playing a character. But to me, Alice was the real character in the sense that when you'd see him come on stage, you'd be like, oh, wow, that's him. Not just like, oh, well, that's the singer of the band. Like, that's him. And I always wanted to have that same effect when I came on stage too. That I wasn't just another singer. There's other guys out there that might, I don't know, whatever, have a more, better voice, range wise or whatever it is. But when I come on the stage, I own the stage and I want my presence felt. So that was something that I really took from Alice, that once I'm on stage, I'm now that person. So that was always very important to me. And I think that's also why, too, like, even though I play guitar and I play bass, a lot of people recently were encouraging me just because we're going through a new era and I'm working on a new band lineup. Like, people are like, why don't you just, play guitar or bass live? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. A lot of my favorite frontmen are also guitar players like Dave Mustaine or Damon Johnson or, Paul Stanley or something. But I'm like, that's not core Rozzik to me. That's not the presentation. I'm supposed to be like an Alice Cooper type character that's solo, no instruments, maybe some props, maybe some costume changes, but I'm able to just work the whole stage and be free.
It's interesting because when you're talking about being the front man, when you go back to playing live, your earlier days of getting gigs locally in New York City, and even if it was playing different music or a different genre, do you remember like a stop moment in your life where you literally say like, "Oh my God, like I really love this. Like I don't want to leave the stage." So was it like the first time you got up or was it like with a particular band or a particular crowd that really made you realize like this is my home. This is where I belong to be?
I think there was one show early on where we played the famous L'Amours in Brooklyn. That place has so much history, but being that I'm a little younger, I think I got to play there like the last year before they closed. Yeah, we did a show there, and I kind of pulled like a Bobby Blitz, where like there was a big long metal intro, and the band starts like thrashing, and then at this right moment, I just kind of ran out on stage and like did a scream and started headbanging, and the crowd went like nuts, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what the people want to see. They were happy and surprised to see me show up. So I've always been about the grand entrance. That was probably the first time. I mean, there's so many like different moments like that. I think when in 2016, when I got the lineup that became the lineup for most of the Vengeance Overdrive era, we did a big show in New York City and it was called Core Fest. We did it at the Gramercy Theater and we opened up with a new song at the time, which was called Mistress. We had a mistress on stage. So the lights went down and the intro music played, and the mistress came out first before we even saw the band. We really planned out this great grand entrance. And then I came out, and just at the right moment, like the song stopped, and my hand went in the air, and the crowd went nuts. And the grand finale at the end, I slit her throat and dragged her off the stage. And the reaction from the crowd then I was like, okay, like I'm being somewhat genuine, but I'm still being theatrical in the way that I want to be. And the crowd's digging this. So I'm like, okay, I think this is what makes me special and different, so I should probably keep doing that. And then in 2019, we got to, tour with Nita Strauss, who's Alice Cooper's guitar player, for a few months. And that was one of the best tours we ever did. And at the end of the tour, I actually got to go on stage with Nita and play Alice Cooper's 18 a couple of shows towards the end of the run. And that was cool because it actually made me think about my father, who was a big influence on me when I was younger. My dad died when I was 18, the first week of college, which was really tough because the last time I spoke to my dad, he told me he bought us Alice Cooper tickets for the fall. So that was really tough on me to get to tour with Nita and to go on stage and do an Alice song with her. That actually meant a lot to me, and I was really fortunate because after that run, she went back on tour with Alice and she invited me to a show. And I got to meet Alice after the show, which was amazing. And a part of me really wanted to tell him about the whole Rozzik show and how I'm so influenced by him. But for some reason, I felt like I shouldn't do that. And I ended up just sharing him the whole story about my family and my dad and interesting, ironic venue coincidences and dates and stuff. And he really appreciated it. He listened to me. We talked about 10 minutes. And, he was telling me about his parents and how he was backstage in London one day and Mick Jagger came in and his dad had just passed away. And I couldn't believe he was telling me all that. So that was interesting. That was like a really cool full circle moment for me.
Yes, well, especially since he was your first idol. That really, to me, is really perfect because some people never get to meet their first idol, but also to have a family connection or be able to share something that's so intimate, almost non music related, and that makes it even more rememberable. So that's really special. Wow. Sorry to hear
Yeah.
about your dad. It's very difficult, when these things happen. Oh, wow. You've had such a long, short life so far, right?
Yeah.
You're much
Never
younger
a dull
than me.
moment.
You're much younger than me, but how did you get that gig working with her? When I talk to a lot of artists, sometimes it's a freak thing or sometimes it's something they really push very hard. So, how did you get connected with getting invited to do all that with her?
With Nita, we had management at the time, and some managers have access to different, tour submissions. Sometimes, bigger bands are looking for tour support, and we submitted to it. And I was told that her manager, who's actually her husband now and drummer, Josh, he saw the Alice Cooper connection in it, and he thought that this might make sense. So they took a chance on us, which was really nice because a lot of other bigger bands really have not given us the opportunities, and I don't know if it's because we're such a mixed bag. I don't know if they're intimidated because most people are usually pretty impressed with us and very complimentary about the performances we have done. There's a lot of reviews out there that say that we've always stolen the show, no matter how big the headliners were. So I don't know if a lot of people just don't want to get blown off the stage, which is my goal every night. I have that Alice Cooper mentality to grab you by the throat. It's war out there. It's organized chaos. I don't know if that's what it is, but that was the situation. They were really nice to us that they gave us that opportunity.
Wow. And what was your experience working with Ace Frehley?
That's a circus. It was good until it didn't exist anymore. I mean, I was with Ace for almost 2 years. That was a situation where we were doing a Kiss themed event. It was called Creatures Fest. Our manager at the time, he was very involved in the whole Kiss community. So he got us on that show, and it's so ironic that the Friday night was Rozzik, John Corabi, Enough's Enough, and Ace Frehley featuring special guest Peter Criss. Now I'm really, really good friends with, Chips Enough. I check in with him every now and again. He's a real sweetheart of a guy. Love that guy so much. He's so much fun to be around. I got to meet Ace's manager at the time, and Ace's manager already knew who I was because of just the New York scene. And we just really hit it off. And then he was like, "Yeah, I want to get you on these shows." And we just did so well. We were just so hungry and professional, and just the whole crew liked us that it just became this unsaid thing where the shows just kept coming, and I just kept pushing to get them. And it was great. We were playing to big crowds every night and dressing rooms with gummy bears and Perrier and all that good stuff, and really living that rock star life, and it was a nice safe bubble for a while. I think in some ways we should have tried to parlay that into something else or get the new music out already, but we just got so caught up in that lifestyle. And then Ace switched management and got a new booking agent. And basically, just the new guy was going to do business a different way and wasn't interested in nurturing new talent. So we were kind of just thrown off that. But it was a great ride while it lasted. I mean, the Kiss Army, whether they're going to see the actual Kiss or just coming out to see Ace, they're a very passionate, fanatical group of people. And I found that if they like you, they will treat you just the same and be very happy to follow you and buy all your merchandise because Kiss fans like to buy stuff. So they bought a lot of Core Rozzik stuff too.
Yes. I saw Ace last year. They were out in full force, and it's amazing. I mean, some of them actually still dress up. They're the
Sure.
spaceman. They do all of that, which I was a
Hmm.
little taken back. I thought, geez, I didn't expect to see that. And then I was very fortunate a few months ago here in New York City. I was able to see Peter Criss, and there was a special
Mm.
event, which was for Raven Drum Foundation, and he was given
Oh,
the award actually. And Ricky Byrd was there. There was quite a few famous drummers there. My friend Matt
wasn't the
Starr
Bouchard
was there.
Matt Starr wasn't the Bouchard brothers there?
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
lot of people there. That event for me was just amazing because I go back to those early Kiss days. To me, Peter Criss was really, I go back to the whole Beth song and all of that. So I was really like,
Yeah.
I was very melancholy over that event. I was just like, wow, that's music history right there. You can't like, it's undeniable, certain people, So, wow, I'm so thrilled that you had the chance to work with Ace for 2 years and have that opportunity because that, to me, Kiss has always been like, top tier for me for
Absolutely.
so many years. So
It's
that's really incredible.
it's a very unique community because it's almost like, a band like Kiss, it's like they've raised like their children and then they've raised like their grandkids in bands. Because now that I'm part of the Kiss community, there's all these 80s legends, people that have worked with them, bands like Enough's Enough or like Trickster, bands that have toured with them that they're still affiliated in this like community. And then there's like someone like me that played with Ace, and it's like almost by default, I get to kind of be part of that community and seen as like a peer and an equal. And it's really flattering because a lot of those bands I grew up with as well. So it's really cool to be around a lot of rock and roll royalty. I mean, I've been really fortunate to meet a lot of my heroes. For whatever I haven't done, like I haven't sold a million records yet, and I hope to be back on tour full time someday because I miss being on the road. There's a lot of things that I still need to accomplish in my life, but at least I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of my heroes, and I think I have to be grateful for that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, but it's also having that experience, that the work that you've done has been credible, that you've been recognized, and that in
Yeah,
its own way, it's great to meet other people, but it's also great to have other people meet you. It's just like, wow, I have my own fan base here, and it does something to you. It just makes you realize that all of your hard work is paid off.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, it's incredible. So I want to go back to your website because it's so well done. I see that you also even have merchandise. So tell me about your merchandise. Do you have like a special artist that you work with, or tell me more about that?
Yeah. So Joey James has been doing my artwork for probably 10 years now. I don't think I'm stepping over. I consider Joey James like a New York artist legend in his own right. He goes way back into the New York City scene at a discounted rate. He's done a lot of local bands artwork, kind of has his own style. He was firstly well known for doing typo negative, like Peter Steele t-shirts. That was kind of his first kind of claim to fame, so to speak, and that's what people know him for. But now he's doing a lot of these like mock t-shirts where like it's like it looks like a band thing, but it's really not a band thing. He's got some really funny stuff that he's been doing. It's like it looks like a metal shirt, but it says Peter Gabriel on it or something like that. Like he does some really funny stuff. And he's done artwork for like Steel Panther and Death Angel and a lot of big bands as well. But he did the artwork for my first album cover for Vengeance Overdrive, which I loved. For our new stuff, we might be going in a more modern direction, so I don't know if he'll do the album covers, but his t-shirt work is just phenomenal. I owe him a lot of gratitude, and I give him a lot of credit because we've been fortunate to sell a lot of t-shirts being a smaller band, and I think a lot of it has to do with his presentation. And I love what Joey does, and I've always kind of collaborated with him on ideas. I've always tried to find that happy medium to like find a way where what he does it looks like Joey, but it doesn't necessarily look like everything that he's done. I've tried to find that weird way of getting him to do something just a little different, where you can tell it's Joey, but it's not exactly, what he's done with other bands, So we've always kind of bounced back and forth. A lot of times I give him ideas and then we kind of collab. And then there's been some times where I don't know. There was actually a few times where he just messaged me. He's like, "Hey man, I got this design," and I'm just like, "Oh, where the hell did you come up with that?" Okay. He's like, "You like it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I like it a lot." He's like, "All right, give me a few bucks." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then, and then we make the t-shirts. So Joey's great. But he's been super busy lately. So I'm waiting to sit down with him and kind of go over some of the new concept stuff because I'm ready to start making some new t-shirts for the DS era. So hopefully we'll be doing that soon with him.
Well, as I listen to you and I hear the concept behind your music and how you're able to create this character and kind of like this storyline to it, do you ever think going past just songwriting and creating either a comic book or a book or maybe a rock opera that could go hand in hand with this as a storyline?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. I still don't know what's the difference between a nerd or a geek or a dork. I'm whichever one is a little bit cooler. I'm not sure which one's a little bit more cooler. Having said that, yeah, people mention that all the time. I'm sorry, I never got into comic books really. I mean, I had a couple of them when I was a kid, but that wasn't really like my thing. But I don't doubt that rock band stuff can be put into comic books. I mean, if someone really wanted to do one, I would approve it. I'm not super passionate about comics. I wouldn't rule it out, but somebody would have to spearhead that if someone was really like inclined to kind of yeah, like turn into a comic book, whatever that transfer would be. But yes, rock opera, 100%. I would love to do like an off Broadway, thing of the Dead Society or Vengeance Overdrive, and have someone. It'd be kind of funny to have someone play me and do like the whole story, and then have the songs come in accordingly. I love musicals. Um, but I'm not a super musical geek. So see, I like musicals, but I don't avidly watch them, but I like the idea of them. I would totally do like a rock opera or a musical, 100%. That's something that I would love to do at some point. I would be very interested in doing that. That sounds like a lot of fun. A lot of work though, but I would totally do that. To me, that's exciting. That's more exciting than a comic book. I like live performance, like that's something that I enjoy. Not just being an Alice Cooper fan or a Rob Zombie fan or a Marilyn Manson fan. I don't talk about him enough, honestly, but I love Meatloaf. He's also another one of my inspirations. I think about rock opera. I think of Meatloaf. So yeah, I would love to do something like that. That would be cool.
That would be actually. It's very interesting when you talk because I've had a few people on this program that have been on Broadway. Konstantin Margolis, he actually was an American Idol. He did a lot on Broadway, very theatrical kind of stuff. Rock of Ages, he was part of, which became very, very popular. And I've also even had a guy on this show, Brett Monroe, who basically does all the cartoons and the comics for all the rock bands out in the Vegas Strip. So my
Interesting.
good friend David Reese, who is an Accept in Bangor Choir, there's a whole comic on him and Stacey Blades. All these guys that I know have been in the comic strips with Brett. So I might have to
Wow.
connect you with a few of these
Yeah,
people.
that sounds cool.
So you have had two albums, which are slightly different. Looking forward, where do you see the concept of moving into Dead Society or moving into, more albums, which could bring you into more touring opportunities?
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately the goal is really, we're a unique band. We put out this cult record pre-COVID. COVID messed things up. We had a lot of lineup changes. We kind of rode the Ace train for a while. So unfortunately, there was a lot of gaps in between releasing music, which I'm terribly regretful for. But there are challenges when you're a smaller artist and you get a bad record deal and you got to wait for that to leave and then you need funding. There's a lot of things that go into it. And also to being a perfectionist, you want to create quality stuff. You don't want to just put anything out there. So that there's been a lot of delays with our stuff, but my goal is really to have a more consistent creative output, shortly here. Once we start going, it'll start rolling finally. And really diving more into that Dead Society universe and storyline. And I'm really looking forward to doing some really fun music videos that kind of showcase that story. We're working with a one guy right now. He's not officially our video director yet, but he's got some brilliant ideas off of basically the liner notes that I gave him of what the storyline is. So we're waiting to circle back that and hopefully get that greenlit to start doing some music videos, for these upcoming songs. That's really my goal, is just to kind of get things rolling again here. It's been a challenging time to say the least.
As you mentioned videos, because I only saw The Dollar, one of the singles, can you explain how the process is making a video? Because there's a lot of young artists that listen to this program and they
Mhm.
don't know where to start. So that would be really helpful.
Yeah, doing a video is a lot of work, and it requires a lot of teamwork. And sometimes you are able to hit every box and sometimes you don't. Unfortunately, there's budgets, there's time, there's lack of resources. So even some of the videos that I've done that I like, I could still see where like we could have done better if we just like I said, had more time or money or whatever it is. But the best thing I could say is, like, you got to be creative. You got to try to create some sort of an interesting concept for the video. I mean, some bands just simply are just playing in a studio, and like that's okay if that's what you want to present. But if you want to present something a little bit more edgy or funny or something like that, you got to do something that people might find interesting. I mean, our one of our last videos during COVID was for a song called Vengeance Is Not Enough. And that was a really cool video because I was kind of almost playing like an action movie star type thing, where I was, breaking into this building and beating up all these bad guys to steal back a suitcase full of money. Punch in, I'm kicking, we're doing like wrestling spots, and there was a lot of physical activity. And the whole video is really just all the band members playing different bad guy characters and me just beating them up. To me, that was pretty interesting because that was the first time we did a video where like the band wasn't performing. We were literally just acting out like a movie. That's an interesting way to do things. I think it's still good. I think sometimes people still want to physically see the band with their instruments doing their thing, but I also think you need to also mix it up a little bit. So like, my suggestion is like getting the team and getting the concept and just being creative and making the most of what you got, for better for worse, whether it's $1 million studio or your friend's backyard, you got to do something to make it interesting because you want people to watch it.
I have an interesting question because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to ask you this question. You have a really great imagination, when you're thinking of your songwriting. Is any of this inspired from a dream you had, or where do you find that your imagination grows? Is it in your dream life or is it in your living life?
That's a good question. I think it's more living and then taking certain things that I already like that are somewhat emotionally involved, because I feel like the whole Dead Society thing, it was very much based off of COVID and the lockdown and all the division with the politics, all the different TV stations and all that kind of stuff. But then it's also like my love for, like, John Carpenter movies and They Live and Escape from New York, and which is really cool because now on our newer music that's coming out, we have like those John Carpenter style like keyboards in the background, which I think is so great. So it's a mix of real life and a mix of things that I grew up with that I enjoy. And even with a lot of the songs I write, like if I write a song and maybe it's about a girl or a love interest or something, it's probably based off of something I experienced, but then I like when I wrote the song Mistress, I mean that's not a real song. I mean Mistress is about a multi-dimensional reptilian mistress that is convincing me to kill her clients in exchange for fame and fortune. But at the root of the concept, when I first wrote the song, and the song's called Mistress, it's about something a little bit taboo, something a little sinful. My motivation for writing was like, what's a song I can write that would piss off my ex-girlfriend? Like that was really like what it was. So it's taking real life and mixing it with fantasy.
That really gets people's attention, When you throw something in like that, they want to really get the real story. Do you foresee in your future being able to lend yourself to soundtracks, maybe in the horror genre? Do you think that's where, if someone could say, could you write a song? Could you think of lending
Yeah,
yourself to the horror movies?
I would love to do something like that. This is the irony of it, because this song Can't Stop, Won't Stop is one of my least horror like songs, ironically. But Glenn Danzig made a really bad horror movie called Veronica, and he picked Can't Stop, Won't Stop. So that's actually in the movie and on the soundtrack. But it's like, that's my most like kind of go get 'em, don't give up, get in the gym or whatever type song. But it's in this like strip club scene. So I guess that kind of makes sense. But it's like a horror movie. Like, why didn't he pick like Mistress or, Spellbound or something? I've technically been on a horror movie soundtrack, but that song's not very spooky at all. But yeah, no, I would love to do something like that.
You could just go on YouTube and find a film, and like it doesn't give you any idea that it's even horror. And then as you're watching it, you're like, oh my God, this is like so strange. And then all of a sudden you realize like you don't even think the writers of that film realized it was going to turn into a horror film. Like it starts out one way and then it turns the corner and then you're in a totally different thing. And a lot of the times that's lending itself to the music in the background. And that make you realize that it's changing its way. So we have a few more minutes. I want to be able to just touch on anything that you would like to talk about to promote your future work, and then we're going to play your single, The Dollar.
Right now, I'm working on new band members, and we did 3 new songs with Dan, and they sound fantastic. We're just waiting to see if we're going to try to get a small record label to back it, or we're going to put it out independently. And we're hoping to do like 2 more songs this summer, so we have like enough for a 5-song EP. Whether we release a 5-song EP or we shop it to labels. So we're in between like getting, some management and different things like that right now. So everything's kind of in this weird behind the scenes thing, but I am looking to get back on the road this fall and at least do a couple of appearances. So I should have some show dates shortly for the fall.
Okay, so can you just promote your website, your social media, where people can download your song and stream it and look forward to hearing about becoming a member of your fan page?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely join the Dead Society and get all our updates and also personal text messages from me. So you can go to KoreRozzik.com. That's KoreRozzik.com. We are also on Instagram at KoreRozzik. I'm also on TikTok at KoreRozzik. And we are on Spotify and Apple Music. Oh, and YouTube.com/KoreRozzik. And that's where you can see the new dollar video and all our other funny videos that we've made over the years.
Very good. Well, this has been a very fun interview. I look forward to hearing more about you and listening to your music. We're going to roll out now with your single, The Dollar. Thank you again, Kore.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium, Dream Central Station, LLC. My audio editor is Al Hemberger at the Loft Recording Studios in Bronxville, New York. This is WNEW 102.7 FM radio.